everyone, I'm Ashlesa Atal and today we are going to discuss some of the GST amendments which are applicable for the November 2020 examination. So first let's talk about what are the exclusions from your syllabus and then we'll look at some of the relevant amendments. So talking about the exclusions which are there, the first and foremost exclusion is about the rate of goods and services. The rate of goods and services are excluded from your syllabus, but you will have to remember the rates which have been prescribed under the composition levy. So the general normal rates of goods and services are excluded, but the rates which have been prescribed under the composition levy are very much a part of your syllabus. They are still included. And apart from this, exemption on supply of goods. So we've studied that there are some goods which are exempted under the chapter of exemptions under GST. So therein we've studied several goods and services which are exempt from GST. So here the exclusion which comes up here is exemption on supply of goods. So which means that exemption on supply of services are not excluded. They are still very much part of your syllabus. They are not excluded from the course. Only exemption on supply of goods is something which has been excluded for the examination purpose. Apart from this, reverse charge on goods. So under the chapter of charge in GST, we've studied about reverse charge on goods as well as services. There's a list of goods and list of services which we've studied about, wherein tax has to be paid under reverse charge, that is the recipient has to pay the tax. So in that situation, the reverse charge on goods has been excluded, but reverse charge on service still is included in the portion. Apart from this, determination and reversal of ITC for real estate projects has been excluded from your portion. Furnishing of GSTR 2, GSTR 1A and GSTR 3 is something which has been excluded. Matching, reversal and reclaim of ITC and matching, reversal and reclaim of reduction in output tax liability. These are some of the exclusions from your portion, and apart from these exclusions there are some other exclusions as well. Talking about what are the other exclusions, so let me make it clear that Finance Act 2020 is not applicable for November 2020 examination. The Finance Act 2020 is not applicable for your examinations, and also the amendments which have been brought in the course of this pandemic, all those amendments, all the reliefs which have been provided, those amendments are also not a part of your portion, or rather they are also excluded from your syllabus. And apart from this, one very important thing which you should know is that the reorganization of state of Jammu and Kashmir into Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Union Territory of Ladakh, which was with effect from 31st of October 2019, is not applicable. ऐसे तो वो applicable होना चाहिए था because ये पहले ही notification आ गया है, but this thing is not applicable because this particular change has been made in the Finance Act 2020, and because Finance Act 2020 is not applicable for your attempt, Finance Act 2020 is not applicable for November 2020 attempt. That is the reason why you will still study the thing as state of Jammu and Kashmir. You will still consider Jammu and Kashmir as a state and not a union territory for all the things which we have studied in the course of GST, that is composition levy हो गया या फिर registration हो गया, कोई भी चीज़ हो गई, उसके लिए we are going to consider Jammu and Kashmir as state of Jammu and Kashmir and not union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. A reorganization of state of Jammu and Kashmir into Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh with effect from 31st of October 2019 is not applicable for November 2020 examination. So I hope that this is clear, and please remember that Jammu and Kashmir ko you will consider as a state and not a union territory for purpose of writing your answers, for the purpose of solving the questions which you get in your exam. Otherwise, now it has been changed to Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and it is very much applicable, but this change has not been included in your examination. So please, please, please remember this particular thing. Now, these were some of the exclusions. Moving ahead to the amendments which have been brought in, we'll first talk about the amendments related to the reverse charge scheme. So, one specific thing or one specific option which has come up under the reverse charge scheme right now is related to the author and publisher reverse charge service which was previously there. So if you just have a look at this reverse charge supply of service which is coming up here, so we've seen that if there's any services, if the supplier of service is a music composer or a photographer or an artist, and the recipient is a music company or a producer or any other person, and the service which is subject matter here is the artist is transferring or permitting to use the copyright of his artistic works or his original music works, etc. So in that situation, it is the recipient who will pay tax and not the supplier who's going to pay tax. This is something which is covered under reverse charge. And on similar line, there's another service, that is a service which is provided by an author uh, wherein he's permitting to use permitting a publisher to use his copyright of any original work which he has done. So in that situation, we've seen that it will not be the author but it will be the publisher who will have to pay tax under reverse charge. But here, with regard to this entry number 9A, there is some option which has come up, and the option is that the author, he can choose to pay tax under forward charge. मतलब अभी तक हमने क्या देखा है, we've seen that if in case an author is permitting a publisher using his copyright for any original literary work which is done, it will be the publisher who will have to pay tax under reverse charge, and it'll not be the author. But now the author, there's an option which he'll have. He can opt to pay tax under forward charge, and if the author is opting to pay tax under forward charge, there are some conditions which have to be satisfied. Matlab, there is an option which has been given to the author. He can opt to pay tax under forward charge, but if he wants to pay tax under forward charge, there are some conditions which he has to comply with. Now, talking about what are the conditions, the first condition which he has to comply with is that he should have obtained registration under GST, and apart from obtaining registration, he is also required to file a declaration. अभी सबसे पहला requirement क्या है? The first and foremost requirement here is that he should obtain registration under GST, and only registration is not the thing. Along with registration, he also has to file a declaration, and in the declaration he will have to state clearly that he is choosing to pay tax under section 9(1), that is under forward charge, and he will comply with all the provisions which are applicable to a person who normally pay tax under GST. So the first condition which has to be complied with, or if the author is choosing to pay tax under forward charge, he can do so only when he has obtained registration under GST and he has filed a declaration wherein he is stating that he is opting to pay tax under forward charge, that is under section 9 and 9(1), and he will comply with all the provisions which are applicable to the person who is paying tax. So this is the first condition. Moving ahead to the second thing which has to be done is that the author, when he is exercising an option like this, he cannot withdraw this option within 1 year from the date of exercising the option. Now say for example the author is exercising an option to pay tax under forward charge on say 10th of August 2020. So from now on up to 1 year he cannot withdraw this option. मतलब अभी 1 साल तक he cannot say that अभी मुझे forward charge पे pay नहीं करना है, I want to pay under reverse charge only, or rather I want the service to be covered under reverse charge only as it was previously covered. So no, he cannot do that. If he is exercising this option, he cannot withdraw the option, or he shall not withdraw the option within 1 year from the date of exercising the option. So we are not going to look at the financial year in which he has exercised the option, we are going to look at the date on which he has exercised the option. It is not that the option will expire as the financial year ends. No, there is no such case. The option will continue until 1 year, which means that this person, he cannot withdraw this option within 1 year. एक साल होने के बाद अगर उसको विड्रॉ करना है, yes, he can do so, but within a span of 1 year he shall not withdraw the option which he has exercised, and this 1 year will be from the date of exercising the option. So the date on which he exercises the option, from that day up to 1 year he shall not withdraw the option which he has exercised. I hope this is clear. And apart from these two things, there's one more additional requirement, and that is this author, when he is issuing the invoice to the publisher, on that invoice as well there has to be a declaration stating that he is opting to pay under forward charge, and this declaration has to be stated on the invoice which is being given by the author to the publisher. So a quick revision of whatever we have discussed till now. An author can choose to pay tax under forward charge if he has obtained registration under GST, first and foremost requirement. Second requirement, if he has filed a declaration and he states that he is exercising to pay the tax on under forward charge, and he will comply with all the provisions which are applicable to the people who are paying tax. मतलब normal taxpayer को जो भी provisions applicable है, whatever are the provisions which are applicable to a person who is paying tax under forward charge, a normal taxpayer, he will also comply with all those provisions which are applicable. And apart from these things, this person, he shall not withdraw the option within 1 year from the date of exercising the option. Say for example, he has opted to pay tax under forward charge on 10th of August 2020. So up to 10th of August 2021, he shall not withdraw this option. If he has once exercised, up to 1 year he shall not withdraw the option which he has exercised. After 1 year, yes, he can withdraw the option, but up to 1 year, within 1 year वो withdraw नहीं कर सकते. And apart from this, the invoice which is being issued by the author to the publisher, that invoice shall also have a declaration made by the author that he is paying tax on forward charge basis. So this was the first change which we had to discuss. Simple change, but the points which a very easy one, and just that you will have to understand that there are some requirements wherever an author wants to pay tax under forward charge. Now moving ahead to the other important change which has come up. The other important change has come up in the reverse charge service, and that is service of renting of a motor vehicle. Now first let's look at what was the provision earlier, then we will look at what is the new provision which has come up. Okay, so talking about services by way of renting of motor vehicle, so I believe that you all must be knowing that service of renting a motor vehicle which is covered under reverse charge, there are two specific rates which we have talked about, 5% or 12%. So 5% is without ITC and 12% with ITC. So let's just look at what was the thing which was covered under reverse charge. So the service which is covered here is renting of a motor vehicle, and this service is provided to a body corporate. So service of renting of motor vehicle is being provided to a body corporate, and who is the supplier here? The supplier here is a person other than a body corporate. So please understand that the recipient here is a body corporate and supplier here is a person other than a body corporate. And apart from that, there is something which I've highlighted here and which we'll look at right now. So here, it is a person other than a body corporate who is paying CGST at the rate of 2.5% on renting of motor vehicles with ITC only of the input service in the same line of business, which means that यहाँ पे the person, the supplier who is supplying this type of service is a person other than a body corporate, but he is a person who is paying CGST at the rate of 2.5%, which means GST at the rate of 5% on renting of motor vehicles, and he is eligible to claim ITC only on the input service in the same line of business. Which means what? Say for example, there's a person Mr. A who is renting motor vehicles, and he's rented say a car to a person Mr. B, and this car he has in and this car he has rented from another person Mr. C. Matlab C has given a car on rent to A, and A has given a car on rent to B. So here this person Mr. A, he is a supplier who is receiving input service of a similar kind, or rather I would say of the same line of business. So यहाँ पे the ITC जो मिल रहा है, if a person is paying tax at the rate of 5%, the ITC which he is eligible to claim is limited. Limited ITC meaning that he can claim ITC only with respect to the input service which he has received, which is in the same line of business. If this person Mr. A, he would have received some repair services for his car, in that situation he will not be eligible to claim the ITC or rather the input tax on those services which he has availed for repair and maintenance of his car. So please understand that there we say 5% without ITC, or rather we should say 5% with limited ITC, because यहाँ पे the ITC which a person can claim is limited to the extent the input services are received from a person who is engaged in the same line of business for the similar kind of service, for the same kind of service. So यहाँ पे क्या था, सबसे पहले supplier, he is a person who is a person other than a body corporate and who is paying GST at the rate of 5% on renting of motor vehicles and claiming ITC only with respect to the input service which is of the same line of business, and recipient here is a body corporate. So I hope the thing before amendment is clear. Before amendment it was simple. It said that there's a person who's not a body corporate and he is paying tax at the rate of 5% on renting of vehicle and claiming ITC only of input services of the same line of business, and the recipient here is a body corporate. Let's look at what was the scenario with the help of some examples. Now let's understand the provision with the help of an example. So let's say there's a person Mr. Shiv, he's a registered person and he's renting his motor vehicle to ABC Private Limited. So here the supplier is a person other than body corporate and the recipient is a body corporate, and the supplier, he has opted to pay tax at the rate of 12%. That is the second option which is there. He is not availing the option to pay tax at the rate of 5%. He is availing the option to pay tax at the rate of 12% with ITC. So here in this situation, what was the scenario before the amendment had come in? Here in this situation, the body corporate, that is the recipient, will not have to pay any tax on reverse charge basis because the supplier himself has opted to pay tax at the rate of 12%. So there is no need for ABC Private Limited, the body corporate, to pay tax at the rate of. So now there is no need for the body corporate, that is ABC Private Limited, to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. Now talking about the second situation. So the second situation here is Mr. Shiv is a registered person and he is renting his motor vehicle to ABC Private Limited, which is a body corporate. So here again, this person is a person other than a body corporate and he is providing services of renting of motor vehicle to a body corporate. and here in this situation he has opted to pay 5% GST without ITC. That is the second option which is available. He has opted to pay GST at the rate of 5% without claiming any input tax credit, or rather I would say with limited ITC. That is, he can claim input tax credit only on the input service which is in the same line of business. So here in this situation, this is the situation which is covered under reverse charge, and yes, in this situation ABC Private Limited, that is the body corporate, will have to pay tax under reverse charge basis because all the three conditions have been satisfied. That is, the supplier is a person other than body corporate, the recipient is a body corporate, and the supplier, he has opted to pay or rather the supplier has opted to pay tax at the rate of 5%. So this is something which is covered under reverse charge mechanism. Now looking at the third example, यहाँ पे in this situation Mr. Shiv is an unregistered person, a person who is not registered under GST, and he is renting his motor vehicle to ABC Private Limited. So here in this situation, Mr. Shiv is an unregistered person. He is a person other than body corporate. He is an unregistered person, and the recipient is a registered person, or rather the recipient is a body corporate. Now in this situation, you tell me whether the body corporate will have to pay tax on reverse charge basis or not, because they are receiving supplies from an unregistered person. Now if we just have a look at what we have seen in the provision, the second column wherein we have seen who is the supplier of service. Now let's see the old provision and let's talk about who is the supplier of service here. So if you just look at the second column here, it says that any person other than a body corporate who is paying CGST at the rate of 2.5% on renting of motor vehicles with ITC only of the input service in the same line of business. So here the first condition, which is that the person should be a person other than body corporate, is satisfied when we talk about Mr. Shiv being an unregistered person. But the subsequent thing which comes up, it says that a person who is paying CGST at the rate of 2.5% or GST at the rate of 5% on renting of motor vehicles and with limited ITC. So when we say that Mr. Shiv is an unregistered person would not be required to pay any GST on or rather he'll not be paying any GST at the rate of 5% on renting of motor vehicles because he is not registered under GST. So here in this situation, if we try and fit the third example of Mr. Shiv being an unregistered person and renting a motor vehicle to ABC Private Limited, Mr. Shiv wouldn't fall under the supplier which has been mentioned over here. So that is the reason why the third point would not be covered under RCM, and hence in that situation ABC Private Limited will also not have to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism, because Shiv does not fall under the category of supplier of service which has been clearly mentioned in this particular provision. So that is the reason why in the third example, when an unregistered person is providing service of renting of motor vehicle to a body corporate, the body corporate will not have to pay any tax on reverse charge basis, because an unregistered person is not a person who would pay tax at the rate of 5% and claim limited ITC. So because Mr. Shiv is an unregistered person, the third example comes out of the ambit of RCM. Understand, there was no intention to exempt services which are provided by unregistered person, or rather there was no intention that no intention of removing this particular type of service from the ambit of reverse charge, and that is the reason why this change or this amendment has come in. So looking at the old scenario, this third case will not be covered under reverse charge mechanism and the body corporate will not have to pay any tax. Now let's see what is the new provision, or rather what is the amended provision, and then we'll come back to this example to see what is the stance in the amended provision. Looking at the amended provision, what are the changes which have come up in this particular situation is, if you just look at the category of supply of service, it just says the services which are provided by way of renting of a motor vehicle which is designed to carry passengers and where the cost of fuel is included in the consideration which is charged from the service recipient. So this basically is a further more clarified version of what was previously there. So it just says that it is a service wherein there is renting of motor vehicle which is happening, and this motor vehicle is something which is for the purpose of carrying passengers, and also the cost of fuel is included in the consideration which is being charged from the recipient. The recipient here still remains a body corporate. The recipient of service still is a body corporate. The service is being provided to a body corporate in this scenario as well. And but if you just look at, there's a slight difference in the column of supplier of service. So पहले क्या देखा था, in the previous scenario we've seen that it is any person other than a body corporate who is paying CGST at 2.5% on renting a motor vehicle and claiming limited ITC. Now let's look at what is the change which has come up. So the change which has come up here is, here it says supplier of service में any person other than a body corporate. Okay, तो यहाँ तक it is same which was there previously. So it is a person other than a body corporate, which means that if a body corporate is providing services to another body corporate, then this particular reverse charge thing will not apply in that situation. So here the supplier is a person other than a body corporate, and he is supplying services to a body corporate, but obvious because the recipient here is a body corporate, and he is not issuing an invoice wherein he is charging GST at the rate of 6% to the service recipient. So like we've seen in the first slide that there are two rates, 5% and 12%. 5% with limited ITC and 12% with ITC. मतलब there wouldn't be any restriction on claiming of ITC if the supplier himself is issuing a tax invoice wherein he is charging GST, collecting GST and paying GST under forward charge. So here the change which has come up is any person who is not a body corporate and is providing services to a body corporate, and he is not issuing an invoice wherein he is charging GST at the rate of CGST at the rate of 6%, or rather GST at the rate of 12% to the service recipient. Now let's have a look at the same example which we had taken previously and see how the amendment will result into a change in how we look at the things right now. Now talking about the amended provision. Amended provision में first वाला point अगर देखेंगे, the supplier is a person other than body corporate, the recipient is a body corporate, and the supplier has opted to pay tax on 12%. So there wouldn't be any change in the first case. Neither there would be any change in the second situation, because this is something which will be covered under RCM even in the amended provision. But when we talk about the third situation wherein the supplier is an unregistered person, this case will now be covered under RCM. Now, why will this be covered under RCM? This is because there's a change in the wordings which were previously there for supplier of service. Now, if you look at the supplier of service in the amended scenario, here it says that supplier of service is a person other than body corporate who supplies the service to a body corporate and does not issue an invoice charging CGST at the rate of 6% to the service recipient. So now here it covers an unregistered person as well. Now how does it cover an unregistered person in this particular situation? Basically, an unregistered person will definitely not issue a tax invoice and he'll not issue an invoice wherein he's charging GST to the recipient. So that's how an unregistered person will now be covered under this particular case. And even if an unregistered person is supplying services to a body corporate, services of renting of motor vehicle to a body corporate, in that situation as well, the body corporate will have to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. So if you just understand, here the supplier covers a person who is not a body corporate, who is providing services to a body corporate, and he is not issuing an invoice charging GST. But in the previous scenario, what was it? In the previous scenario, it says that a person other than a body corporate who is paying tax at the rate of 2.5%. So in that situation, an unregistered person was not covered. But with the change, which the amendment which has been brought in, an unregistered person will also be covered, because an unregistered person will definitely not issue an invoice wherein he is charging GST, because he is an unregistered person. He cannot issue a tax invoice. So that's how now when we look at the third example, you will understand why in the amended scenario, in the third example will also hold good for the purposes of reverse charge. It was never an intention of the authorities to this particular type of transaction out of ambit of GST, and this is the reason why there was this loophole, there was this lacuna which off, and for the purpose of that they have come up with this particular amendment. Let's have a quick recap of the renting of motor vehicle service which we were talking about right now. So यहाँ पे let's divide it into two categories. So when GST is payable at the rate of 5% and when it is payable at the rate of 12%. So recipient here is a body corporate, and when there will be reverse charge which will be applicable. So dividing it into two categories, 5% and 12%. So if the supplier is a person other than a body corporate and recipient is a body corporate, then in that situation reverse charge will be applicable, and the person who will pay GST will be the recipient. If the supplier of the service itself is a body corporate, then in that situation reverse charge will not be applicable, and it will be forward charge which will be applicable, which means that the supplier will have to pay GST at the rate of 12%. If the recipient is a person other than the body corporate, then again this is something which will not be covered under reverse charge. So things to remember here is the reverse charge scheme will be applicable only in the situation where the recipient is a body corporate. If the recipient is not a body corporate, then forward charge will be applicable and the supplier will have to pay tax. Or if the supplier himself is a body corporate, then in that situation as well reverse charge scheme will not be applicable, and the tax will have to be paid at the rate of 12% under forward charge. Reverse charge के लिए the recipient has to be a body corporate and the supplier has to be a person other than a body corporate. I hope that everything which we've discussed with respect to the changes in reverse charge mechanism is clear. In the next video, we'll discuss about the other amendments as well which have come up. Thank you. Keep studying and keep revising.